Kamen Rider is an incredibly vast IP that has been around since 1971. With 35 main titles under its belt, pun intended, it's a franchise that seemingly has infinite potential to be just about anything. Different series have different motifs, themes, and messages that no doubt will resonate with someone out there. And that's just one of the amazing things about the franchise. There's a series out there for everyone, granted you actually like tokusatsu. I myself just got into the franchise around 2 years ago and have been hooked on it ever since. I've been slowly making my way through the franchise, watching whatever looks the shiniest and coolest to me. So far I've only seen 01, Geats, Gaim, Gotchard, currently following Gav, and just finished Faiz in December. And out of all of them, Faiz has been the one I've been compelled to talk about the most. For me, Kamen Rider Faiz was a fun time, but was also a bit rough around the edges. After coming off a lot of the Reiwa shows that were big on spectacle and action, Faiz felt like an entirely different thing to me that honestly took a while to actually get used to. The vibe from Faiz was more like a J-drama than a tokusatsu series, and once I realized that, the show became a lot more fun for me. There was a deep focus on the characters and their relationships, the action feeling like a second thought, resulting in the fights being a bit on the underwhelming side. Like episodes would go on just having the characters interact with each other and go through different scenarios without the main plot really moving along all that much, and then towards the end of the episode they remember that Faiz needs to have a fight with the monster of the week and just randomly have them show up to throw hands. This was something that happened a lot. But I digress, this video isn't meant to be a review of Kamen Rider Faiz as a whole, but rather I'm here to talk about, and to an extent, defend one of the biggest criticisms the series has, that being its overuse of the miscommunication trope. For those unaware, the miscommunication trope occurs when misunderstandings or incomplete communication drives conflict or complications in a story, often through misinterpretation, assumptions, or withheld information. It's an annoying and downright frustrating trope to watch, especially when a lot of the conflict and tension the characters face could be easily resolved by just talking to each other. This in turn results in the conflict feeling kind of artificial and forced, something you see a lot happen in the romance genre. If you grew up watching a lot of Disney Channel shows, you'll know just how truly infuriating this trope can be. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't get annoying in the case of Kamen Rider Faiz. This trope was milked dry by the time the series was over and kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. But after having some time to think about it, and realize how it plays into a lot of the main themes of Faiz, I began to appreciate it a tad bit more. While Kamen Rider Faiz is a story about a lot of things, for this video I'll be focusing on one theme in particular. That being the theme of communication and understanding. And so I will be spoiling all of Faiz, so if you haven't seen the series yet, now is a good time to do so. Faiz began airing in 2003, just around the turn of the millennia. Technology was on the rise around this time, with cell phones gaining a lot of popularity, especially among younger people. Cell phones play a big role in the series. Characters are almost always seen with their cell phones on them. It's their primary means of communicating with each other, though most times, they're only ever really using their phones to call for help. And most important of all, Faiz himself, as well as the other riders, use cell phones to trigger their transformations and have weapons made from everyday devices. So because of this, communication is integral to the characters as it dictates how they interact with each other. Each character communicates and understands in vastly different ways, which in turn helps to make their personalities be rather distinct from each other. Let's start things off with our main character and the embodiment of the struggle, Takumi. At the start of the series, Takumi is introduced to us as a guy who's very aloof, keeps to himself, doesn't like to talk much, and doesn't bother explaining anything regarding him or his past. He's lived his life as a vagabond, a lone wolf moving from city to city without ever forming any real connections with other people. But then that all changes when he runs into Mari, a girl who, after having a spat over mixing up each other's bags, reluctantly takes up the mantle of Kamen Rider Faiz, initially doing so out of feeling responsible for bringing her harm under his care, rather than from a desire to want to protect people from the threat of orphanauts, monsters who are the next step in human evolution. Though he does eventually choose to fight to protect others and for justice, it takes a while for him to get there. Throughout the first half of the series, Takumi struggles to actually communicate and express himself to the other characters, often refusing to state his true intentions and reasons behind his actions, which causes him to frequently have friction with the rest of the main cast. For lack of a better term, Takumi is a tsundere, and he tells us why he's the way he is early on in the series. He's a guy afraid of getting close to people because he's afraid he'll hurt them for reasons the audience isn't privy to. He believes he can't trust himself around people, so he tries his best to distance himself from them. Hence why for the first couple of episodes, he's a huge jerk to Mari and newcomer Keitaro, a wholesome guy who dreams of making the whole world happy through bringing them clean laundry. This is all an attempt to push people away so he doesn't have to deal with having to lose them, or worse, having to hurt them, figuratively and literally. But he does slowly begin to warm up to the rest of them, the people seeing him for the genuinely good person he is deep down inside, and so provide him with a place to call home and people to call his family. Takumi's journey is one of learning to communicate and express himself to the people he holds dear. Throughout the run of the series, we see him slowly opening up to the people around him, but every time he brings down his walls to allow himself be vulnerable, he immediately puts them back up. A sign that deep down he does desire to connect with people and be understood, but continues to hold himself back out of fear of experiencing hurt again. Takumi's struggle with communication is where a big chunk of the interpersonal drama in the series comes from. He'll often say and do things that, while we the audience understand that it's from a well-meaning place, to the other characters it's just straight up mean and disrespectful. For example, when Takumi finds out that Yuka, a girl who Keitaro has a huge crush on, is secretly an orphanage, he tells Keitaro to stay away from her but doesn't tell him why, which causes Keitaro to get really upset about it, leading to the two butting heads for a while. This was his attempt to protect his friend from danger and heartbreak, but by not clearly stating his intention, he drives a wedge between the two of them for a couple of episodes. There are many more cases like this throughout the series, and frankly, it gets really annoying sometimes watching our main character be an asshole to the people who are just trying to be friends with him. But at the same time, you can't help but see Takumi as an awkward, lovable dork who's really trying his best to open up to others. By the end of the series, he grows into a person who is able to understand and be understood. Watching him show genuine care for the people he now considers family is bound to bring a tear to your eye. He becomes someone who almost feels like a different person at the end, which is why he's one of my all-time favorite Kamen Rider protagonists. Takumi aside, the rest of the main cast all embody different aspects of communication and miscommunication. Keitaro is a character who is just the sweetest. He represents the openness of communication and is one who is the most honest about his feelings regarding everything. With a dream like wanting to make the whole world happy with the power of clean laundry, he has an air of childish whimsy to him, though this also makes him pretty naive. Keitaro never holds back when expressing himself to others. He's very animated and lets everyone know that from the way he talks to them, but the problem he faces is with the people he communicates with. Because everyone has their walls up in some way or form, it makes it hard for him to actually connect with the rest of the cast simply because they are not willing to receive him. To them, Keitaro can come off as doing the most, which can be off-putting and annoying to a lot of people and overwhelming to others, especially to those who are pretty awkward themselves. He really tries his best to be friendly to everyone but is often met with weird looks or straight up gets ignored. To be honest, I kinda didn't like the way they treated him a lot of the time. You see him clearly wanting to yap about literally anything or confide in the people he considers friends, and most times they just shoot him down. The writing often felt mean-spirited towards him, especially when it tried to make him the comedy relief. Like, it gets so frustrating for him that he expresses on several occasions how he doesn't like how they do stuff without him and how he feels left out. The plots literally happening outside him and they barely say anything about it. That shit hurt, man. Mind you, this is the guy who provides a place for the rest of them to live, free of charge, and even gives them jobs. But despite all that, Keitaro tries his best to be there for everyone regardless. He understands them and doesn't try to force them into communicating if they don't want to. He's a patient guy, and it's why he's one of the first people Takumi really gets vulnerable with. While Keitaro is a character who listens and wants to be listened to, the same can't really be said for the character that is Kaido, who shares a lot of similarities with Keitaro. However, where Kaido differs is in the way he communicates. The rambunctious wildcard Kaido is a man who, after becoming an orphanage, becomes part of the trio consisting of the aforementioned Yuka, himself, and another man by the name of Kiba, who I'll be talking about later. Kaido is a character who is introduced in an amazing arc that deals with him learning to let some dreams go. He was a man who was an amazing guitarist but got into an accident that led him losing the ability to play, leaving him feeling lost. He held on to the dream of wanting to play the guitar, but that brought him a lot of agony. That is until he meets someone who he sees a lot of promise in and mentors that he's finally able to let that dream go. It's one of my favorite arcs in the series. Kaido is a man who is super expressive and always says what's on his mind, like Keitaro, but Kaido never wants to listen to anyone. He's self-centered and loves to be the focus of attention when he can. However, he's not someone that wants to be burdened by other people's feelings if they don't align with his, and loves being told exactly what he wants to hear. He's not someone who enjoys being involved in serious conversations, and never tries to acknowledge the severity of situations until it directly affects him. This is reflected in the way he treats Mari. Kaido has a huge crush on her, but Mari doesn't feel the same way at all, and despite telling him over and over again that she has no feelings for him, he chooses not to listen to her and doubles down on his romantic gestures towards her. He never once sees what he's doing as wrong, be it trying to win her affection or in the way he talks and treats the rest of the cast. This doesn't make him a terrible character to watch though. He's actually one of my favorites. Unfortunately, for most of the show, it feels like the writers didn't know what to do with him, as he just stumbles around from one story beat to another, making his arc feel kind of disjointed. Towards the end of the series, however, Kaido does show his growth as he begins looking after a recently orphaned kid who's quite a handful to deal with. One, because he's a grieving child who's handling the loss of his family through outbursts and tantrums, and two, he's actually the vessel for the Orphanok King who wants to destroy humanity. It's through this kid that Kaido does learn to understand people and make the effort to listen, as for the first time in his life, he thinks about contributing to something bigger than him. Moving on to the next of the Orphanok trio is Yuka. Yuka is a girl who is introduced to us at what might be the lowest point of her life before becoming an Orphanok. Her life was a sad one, growing up in a home where she was neglected by her parents who poured all their love and attention onto her sister, the same sister who would get her friends to bully her. Yuka had no place she could feel safe in. Her only form of comfort came from exchanging text messages with her pen pal Keitaro, and after she is reborn as an Orphanok and forced to leave home, she winds up in the care of Kiba, the two living together with Kaido joining them later. Yuka is a person who never really communicates how she truly feels about anything. She wants to be there for everyone and listen to what they have to say, but never does speak about what troubles her, which is thanks to the environment she lived in her whole life. Yuka sees herself as a burden most times and doesn't want to trouble others with her own feelings or existence, most of the time apologizing to everyone else for no reason at all, suffering in silence as she herself chooses to ignore and deny her own emotions, which leads to her occasionally crashing out and murdering people, mostly men, who try to hit on her. Honestly, justified. Because of the way she communicates, or rather doesn't, it often leaves her vulnerable to be taken advantage of, either by the bad guys or her fellow companions like Kaido. Oh yeah, Yuka also has a massive crush on Kaido, who doesn't even acknowledge her feelings for him. Yuka is a tragic character who reflects the dangers of not communicating with others and oneself, smiling through all the pain. Even when others like Kiba directly inquire about her thoughts and feelings, she often responds with the best answer because she's afraid of revealing the real emotions she's buried deep down. And to make it even worse, she doesn't get a happy ending. After being deceived and taken advantage of again, Yuka is unfortunately separated from the group and sustains heavy injuries. She's left to slowly die alone, and in her final moments, sends Keitaro one more text, apologizing and finally being honest with her feelings, wishing him nothing but happiness as she fades away. On the other hand, we have Kiba, who contrasts Yuka in a few ways. While Yuka kept it all to herself, never communicating with others beyond surface level interactions, Kiba was a person who was always open and having conversations with others just to understand them better. He's a guy who's well aware of the importance of talking to others and sought to truly understand the people around him on a deeper level. Even when it came to conflict, he was always the person trying to resolve tensions through dialogue rather than violence. Kiba was a man who lost everything after a tragic car accident that led to the death of his parents and put him in a coma for 3 years. Returning as an Orphanok, he comes to find out that he's left with nothing. His parents' home and business were sold off by greedy relatives, and the girlfriend he had prior to his coma left him to cozy up to his cousin. He does end up being taken in by SmartBrain, the company that acts as a fund for the Orphanoks, under the condition he continues to kill humans. But Kiba isn't about that life. He's someone who still holds on to his humanity, which leads to him frequently getting targeted by SmartBrain because he doesn't want to do his job. Kiba's story is all about seeking peaceful resolution through dialogue and believes that anything can be solved through talking it out. Unfortunately, not everyone follows his way of thinking. He's not a guy who second guesses the things people tell him, which is one of his fatal character flaws. Because of how genuinely he believes what people tell him, it often sets him up to be manipulated and taken advantage of, leading to a lot of misunderstandings. I'd argue he's the one who's taken advantage of the most in the series. He represents the fragility of communication, that while you may mean well with the words and feelings you share and receive from others, it helps to not blindly believe everything you're told, especially when it comes to conflict. It helps to get the bigger picture from both angles before taking action. Then there's Mari, who, very much like Kiba, is always seeking to resolve conflict as peacefully as she can. However, her approach is entirely different. Mari is the linchpin that connects and bridges everyone together. She's patient, understanding and full of empathy, always seeing the best in people even when they don't deserve it. She doesn't just jump into conclusions the way Kiba does and takes her time to understand the situation, which is why she's the one least affected by the many bouts of miscommunication the series throws at us. She's a genuine person who represents the hopeful power of communicating and sharing your feelings, that no matter what problem you have, the first step to getting through it is by communicating. She also symbolizes the importance of overcoming isolation and reaching out to others. Humans are social creatures. As much as you'd like to admit you're better off alone and can do things on your own, you can only go so far before needing to rely on someone else. Hell, this is a common theme in many anime, and Mari shows the power of what a good friend and support can do in your life. While all these characters represent communicating in some way, there is one other character I haven't mentioned up until this point, the biggest open Faiz and the embodiment of the negative side of communication. Our secondary rider, resident racist, and certified yandere, Masato Kusaka, also known as Kamen Rider Faiz. Kusaka is an absolute bastard. You will love to hate this guy just because of how easy he makes being an op look. Despite being the secondary rider, he doesn't exactly fight for good or justice. In fact, he's the one who drives most of the interpersonal conflict within the series, all in the attempt to push his own goals forward. Kusaka was orphaned at a young age and found a new home at the Ryusei Academy, a school that housed a lot of orphan kids, one of them being Mari. As a young boy, he was always picked on by other kids, but would always be saved by Mari. This caused him to develop a crush on her, a crush that carried on into adulthood. The thing about Kusaka is that a lot of his motivations are fueled by his intense feelings for Mari. From the moment he's introduced in the story, reuniting with her, he becomes obsessed with her and his desire to be the man he thinks she needs, willing to do anything if it means protecting her. But Kusaka doesn't exactly love Mari as a person, but rather loves what Mari represents. He sees her as the only woman who could ever replace his mother. So yeah, I'll leave you to interpret that however you'd like. Kusaka is the embodiment of weaponized communication, taking advantage of the miscommunications and misunderstandings amongst the characters to sow discord. His genius lies in his ability to exploit the weaknesses and insecurities of the other characters, pitting them against each other to further his goals. He's a guy who doesn't communicate truthfully, spewing lies to everyone around him, never revealing his true self or intentions to other people, unless it involves wanting to wipe out the orphanages. And that's another thing about Kusaka's character. He has an absolutely raging hate boner for the orphanages, and while he has every right to be, since he literally watched them murder the people he called family, traumatizing him for the rest of his life, he never once stops to think about other ways of handling the orphanage threat. It's violence or nothing. Even when other characters begin looking for other ways to communicate and understand the orphanages, Kusaka chooses to continue fighting them, even when he finds out that the man he called his father was an orphanage too. Kusaka represents what happens when people refuse to communicate and understand each other. He's someone whose trauma led him to frequently argue with the rest of the cast, as well as commit a lot of horrendous acts all in the name of selfishness. He was someone who never let himself be connected to others, isolating himself from everyone while obsessing over Mari. I think in the end, he was a person who didn't know he wanted to be understood, which is why he never once feels connected to the others. He's a stark contrast to Takumi who, despite having his own trauma, put in the effort to accept his shortcomings and change as a person. Kusaka never did try to change because he always thought he was in the right. His journey is a sad and lonely one, burning every bridge he could until the very end. But even then, the other characters never did stop reaching out to him in an attempt to connect and help him, which is why his final moments are sad. He's left to die alone, calling out to Mari who was out desperately searching for him. Unfortunately, he's never able to reach her, never able to communicate. Ultimately, the miscommunication trope in Faiz isn't just a plot device, it's a thematic cornerstone. The series explores how connection is both fragile and essential. Characters like Takumi show that genuine understanding requires effort and vulnerability, while Kusaka demonstrates the harm that can arise when communication is weaponized. Kamen Rider Faiz may not be for everyone, but its exploration of communication and connection makes it one of the more compelling entries in the franchise. Its use of the miscommunication trope, while occasionally vexing, serves a greater purpose in driving these themes home. But let me know what you guys thought about Faiz, its miscommunication, as well as this video. I've been slowly growing through the franchise, so maybe there'll be more Kamen Rider content in the future, depends on how inspired I feel. But if this is something you'd like to see more of, let me know. But that's it for this video. As always, this has been your very favorite slice of bread. Stay toasty.